And it looks like we're recording. Robert, can you do just a little bit of an overview for folks about how we're going to be administering this?
Sure. So we're live on YouTube now, and basically you can raise your hand using the Zoom raise your hand feature if you want to ask a question, and then you'll be asked to unmute when it's your turn. There'll also be text-based questions coming as well. So that's basically how we'll run it. So I'll be watching for hands being raised.
So for the most part, Robert is going to be playing referee, and Will and I will be answering questions. If somebody else on the team has an answer, they can chip in as well. Let's start with some quick announcements. So as most of you know, the ICO for Holo host ends on Saturday. We've been going for nearly a month. It's going to end this Saturday at 10 a.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. So that's about something like 34 hours from now, somewhere in there. So we're getting close. 36 hours from now. What else? We have, if you haven't already done so, please join our chat community. It's at chat.holochain.org. And you can also find us on Telegram at t.me/channel Holo, CHANNELHOLO. We can do some quick introductions. I'm Matthew Schutte, and we have Will Harris Brown, who you may know from Telegram as Will Tony Percentage Harris Brown. There are some scammers in Telegram and elsewhere trying to get people to send funds to the wrong places. Do not fall for these scams. Will, can we get you unmuted for a second? Robert, can you unmute Will so that Will can tell people how to avoid being scammed?
Hi, yes, I'm Will. You have probably seen me around on Telegram, as Matthew said. There's a couple things, specific ones going on right now, which is, one, there's someone with the username at @Will_Harris_Brown. It's my same username on Telegram, but with an A at the beginning. And they have my profile picture in the same bio as I used to have. It's actually outdated at this point, but they've been messaging people and asking for money. That's not me. It's not anyone on our team. If you find them, let us know and report them so that Telegram might ban their account. Yeah, and always, if you get a message from someone that claims to be on our team, you can check it against the pinned message in Telegram, which has a list of all the actual admins and their actual usernames. The other one is people claiming that there's a bonus for Holo, for the ICO, that you would, I guess, send them ETH and then they would. I don't know exactly how it works, but we're pretty sure it's a scam. There's no bonuses. We haven't made an agreement with anyone for doing a bonus pool of any kind. So if you see something that says there's a bonus for like a 10% bonus for the ICO, that's also a scam.
Greg says that YouTube audio isn't working, so we'll try to get everyone. We'll try to get that fixed as quickly as we can. The one Ethereum to try to purchase is on ICO.holo.host. We're very careful not to be listing addresses elsewhere. We just say, hey, look at that one. That's the official address. So if somebody's saying, hey, send it to here, that's not us. That is not our security protocol. That's somebody else trying to steal your money. So those are the quick announcements. All right.
Also on that same site that Matthew's mentioning, ICO.holo.host, where we have our address listed, there are very detailed and thorough instructions on how to check that address that you'll see on the site is also the right address It's verified in a couple different ways that we've made an effort to make them really secure and consistent.
Yeah, so that even if somebody has had you sort of land on a different page, you need to check the HTTPS thing, make sure that's green, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've taken some precautions to try to make sure that you are as unlikely as possible to get scammed. All right. Does anybody want to raise their hand with a question? Arabiata. All right, Araya Bata. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I had a few questions because I myself invested in the Holo port. So I am trying to understand and also I'm in the process of developing an application. So I'm trying to understand, is Holo Fuel for someone like me who is developing an app, or since I have already invested in a Holo port, I can offer, like, what do you say, the space, the processing power, and then make the Holo Fuel and then pay for my application. How does that work?
Yeah, so basically Holo Fuel is the currency that you will get paid in when your device does hosting for others. Who are those others? Usually they're going to be application developers. It could be just a community as a whole that's running an app, but our expectation is, at least early on, it's likely to be the developer who has built an app. And they, just like today, they end up paying Amazon Web Services to host their application or host their website. In the Holo system, they end up paying hosts like you, whether they're running a Holo port or they're running Holo on their existing laptop or desktop. In order to have the currency to pay you, they have to have purchased it from someone else initially. Initially, the only people who are issuing currency is the Holo organization, ourselves. Now, down the line, if you as a host demonstrate that you are delivering top quality service, you have great uptime, low latency, et cetera, you may build up a reputation and can qualify to have a reserve account where you could essentially pre-sell your own promise to deliver hosting. So in that case, then you become able to issue Holo Fuel. Now, of course, it's backed by your capacity to be able to deliver on those promises you're making. But that's the thing that people have kind of gotten confused by around, wait, how does this currency fluctuate and all of that? That's basically it, that it's you going, hey, I'll issue an IOU. I've got reputation, and if you think that my reputation is solid enough, you'll be willing to pay me for hosting that I'm promising to deliver. Now, just like a debt market, companies today issue debt, but they make a promise when they issue that debt. Hey, we'll pay back this debt and we'll give this percentage. Well, that's kind of like the promise that you're making in terms of I'm promising to deliver hosting capacity. Just like in the debt markets, the value of that debt ends up being affected by the reputation of that company. Well, the value of your Holo Fuel that you would be issuing would be affected by your reputation. And that would include things like, how are you delivering? How much Holo Fuel have you issued that's still outstanding? And so others, if they see you issuing lots of fuel, but not necessarily delivering on those services, very quickly people would go, that fuel is not worth very much. We find that to be a risky bet. So I'll kind of leave it there, but hopefully that makes visible the way in which this capacity, this currency can sort of breathe. The supply can expand and contract, but can do so in a distributed manner. He has a follow-up question. Robert, yeah, perfect. Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand, like, from a host perspective, though I know this entire conversation is more focused on the ICO, coming ICO. So from a host perspective also, it's like first you have to prove your worth to the community before you can start earning the fuel itself, or at the beginning start hosting and you'll start earning something?
No, right away when you start hosting, you're earning fuel.
Okay.
The thing that you have to actually build reputation to
Right.
be able to do is to issue new fuel.
Okay. Okay.
Right? To basically be able to kind of print your own money, as it were, right? It's not exactly print your own money, it's make promises backed by your reputation. But that's the thing that you have to have established some history so that you have skin in the game.
Right. So
when you're making these promises, other people feel like they can rely on them, and that if you break your promises, what it costs you is the reputation that you've accrued, right? So it's a mutual credit system, and so initially, if somebody has no reputation, they don't have any ability to issue credit. They can't go negative, essentially.
So just like last.
Yes.
So my internet is choppy. So, and I have two ports with obviously a lot of other devices. So at my home, let's say plug in the device, or say use it through Wi-Fi or something. And then is it like the choppy internet is still like good uptime for what we're expecting?
It's
the kind of users.
Obviously that would affect your reputation. And so if your reputation is, yes, he's always online, but his internet tends to be a little slower, the way that you would be able to compete is by lowering the price a bit. And not every application needs very fast responses. Sometimes it's just, we want an extra backup available for cold storage, essentially. So we've tried to design this in a way where even people who have low capacity devices or are on a very sort of poor or slow connection, there's a capacity for them to earn Holo fuel as well, despite the fact that they aren't the top quality device or top quality connection. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, we've got Winslow.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, my question as an investor is, I'm trying to understand what fuel might be worth in the future. And obviously it's a very different situation than buying a token in an ICO, because the tokens are scarce, whereas fuel is designed to be dynamic and breathe, as you say.
Yeah.
So the point that I really don't understand is, like, when a host can go into negative balance and issue fuel, or when the Holo organization itself does that, how is the price set for that new fuel that's issued?
Sure. So it is a dynamic marketplace, right? And so what we expect will happen is, and I can't make promises about how our currency will move, that would be illegal, but our expectation is that the price at which hosts will be able to issue currency that customers will actually be willing to pay for is going to be set at some level by the market cost of delivering that hosting. Benchmarking relative to Ethereum, what we ended up establishing was that the cost of providing hosting, performing specific work, it kind of was serving peer-to-peer Twitter, doing the kinds of whitelisting that we actually had to do for our own ICO, as well as the DAO, the Distributed Autonomous Organization code that was on the Ethereum website's homepage. So we did benchmarking against those things, and depending on the application, because every application has a different balance of bandwidth, storage, and processing power, depending on the application, Holo was about somewhere between 100,000 times and 1,000,000 times cheaper than Ethereum. Now we're pricing our ICO, our Holo tokens that we're selling in the ICO, at 10,000 times cheaper And we're doing that for two reasons. One, to demonstrate how much more elegant our design is than Ethereum. 10,000 times cheaper is a lot cheaper, right? That's the difference between being able to buy a remote control car and being able to buy a real car. And not just any real car, but a Lamborghini. Right? $40 versus $400,000. That's the 10,000 times difference. But the other reason that we made it 10,000 times cheaper as our price point is because that makes visible, when you look at our benchmarking, that makes visible that we're actually underpricing our currency, right? We're under promising, essentially. Because when other hosts step in, it's not that you'll be able to buy one Lamborghini, you'd be able to buy 2 or 5 or 10, because they're going to be able to undercut us on price. We're promising to deliver this much computing capacity for one Holo, and they're going to come in and go, well, shoot, I can deliver 100 times that, or 1,000 times that. Maybe not 1,000, 10 times or 100 times that, according to our benchmarking, which means they're going to find some margin in the middle where they are going to undercut us on price, selling it for cheaper than we do, and thus over-delivering what it was that we promised to deliver. So that's the basic gist. What my expectation is that the amount of compute that you will get, we're promising this amount, and fairly quickly, the amount of compute that will actually be delivered will rise and then level out. And when it levels out, if demand goes up, the price will start to rise. And someone like Aryabhata is going to step in and go, ooh, I'll sell it below that price point. They will issue currency, bringing that price back down in line. And so we have mechanisms for trying to make sure that that currency price point stays relatively stable. It's not going to be static, but it will be relatively stable. And that enables the members of our community to trust that they can make use of Holo as a utility currency, right? As a medium of exchange, rather than being worried that if they used it right now, they're going to miss out on some giant upside. But that's how the currency will behave once it reaches some sort of equilibrium relative to the cost of actually delivering hosting services. So I hope that without violating the law in making predictions around how our currency price will operate, I've been able to make visible what will happen in terms of the capacity. And since this is an asset-backed currency, as it delivers those greater assets, and you'll be able to draw your own conclusions about what you think that will do in terms of the price. The way I usually frame it is, if we are able to deliver on what we're promising here in delivering 20,000 or 50,000 times more efficiency than the Ethereum network, what do you think that's going to do to Ethereum's currency value? Right? If a competitor steps into your space and starts offering a similar service at 50,000 times cheaper than you can, would you still want to be hodling ETH? So that's probably about as close as I can get without crossing any lines. Okay, next question. Anita. We have Anita unmuted.
Hey
Yes.
there, Matthew. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad you can hear me. Listen, I'm coming from a wholly different space. I'm not an investor in the ICO because I'm in the US, but I've bought a Holo host. So my perspective is, I want to be able to help what you're building on the whole, right? The system. And because I think it's an amazing, amazing thing you're doing. And so I don't want to think about all these technical things. I want to know that I can plug and play, and I will be able to easily manage my Holo host and be supported with that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, I've been talking a lot. I might go ahead and let Will speak to that. Can we get Will unmuted?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. And hi, Anita.
Hey, Will.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
So one thing to keep in mind is that we're still, like, right now in the fundraising stage for the Holo software, and the Holo ports we're we're working to get them produced, but they're not. That's not all finished up yet. So there's not too much that we can say that's absolutely certain, but we are really committed to making the Holoports really easily plug and play, because as we've said, we're going to make it the Holo software available to be downloaded on any device.
Right.
So anyone's spare computer, or they could build their own computer to run the Holo software. But we're selling the Holoports because we want people to, if they have the means, to be able to, like you said, just get a plug and play device that doesn't take too much fiddling or maintenance to set up, and is just dedicated to hosting Holo, and can do that to jumpstart the network and to allow people, people like you who don't have the time to figure out how to set it up by themselves or set something up by themselves, but to still participate, which is really amazing. So the plans are to have a really easy setup process, and to have almost every setting of the Holoport be able to be either really detailedly configured, or to just be able to put it to the default, or let an autopilot handle it.
Okay.
That's one of the main things that we're doing to make it so that Holoports can be really easily set up by anyone.
Great. Can I have a follow-up?
Of course.
So you're going to release the Holoports first. Will the ability to use our devices as hosts come later or at the same time? What do you think?
Yeah, that'll most likely come a little later once the Holo network is a little more established.
Okay. That's what I needed. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Oh, thank you for your support.
The one other thing that I will say on the Holoports is, we are not planning to provide maintenance or customer support for your laptop should you just download and run our Holo software, right? It's open source software. Yeah, you can run it. But for the Holoports, we are trying to make maintenance very easy. So the anticipation at this point is, if it's not able to get resolved relatively quickly, like 15 minutes or so, we're going to ask you to put it in a box and send it, and we're going to send you another, something along those lines. So we're working to try to make it as efficient as possible and effortless as possible for the owners of Holoports. All right, we've got Tejas. I think that's how you pronounce it, or Tejas. I'm going to go with Tejas. Can we get you unmuted?
In India, it's called Tejas. I think in Spanish, it's Tejas. So thank you. I have this question. You mentioned that the Holo host will be able to issue currency at some time, and they have the reputation, and it will be like Tejas's Holo fuel. But my sense is that we need one single currency. Like Holo fuel should be one fuel. It should not be like backed by one by Holo organization and another by other people, because otherwise it will confuse and result in multiple currencies with different reputations, so to say. So I am a little bit confused about what you mentioned earlier on in terms of the ability of users, and that being, there are different levels of trust of different Holo fuels. So I just wanted to clarify that question, if you can.
Sure. We've got more details on that in our green paper and our currency paper. It has to do with reserve accounts. But this is not something where individuals are, for the most part, going to be paying attention and making these decisions. This is going to be based on, as demonstrated through the use of Holo itself, right? Individual hosts are going to be establishing reputation in the form of actual work performed, what they were able to deliver things, what uptime was like, what their failure rates were like, etc. And based on that, they're going to essentially establish creditworthiness. And if you're a developer, you're setting your own settings for what's the creditworthiness that you're willing that you're requiring, essentially. What's the performance level that you're requiring, and what's the price that you're looking to pay? So that's the basic overview of how we're expecting this dynamic marketplace to work. Again, this is a distributed system. not a centralized one, though we are starting with Holo, the organization, being the only ones who can issue currency. So I hope that makes it a little bit more clear.
Sure. There's one more question I have.
Sure.
Which are going to be the initial Holo applications that you see? I'm sure there are many in development or many have connected with you. So what are some of the applications that you see may come up when Holo is released or in the first few months of the release?
Yeah, I mean, there's the applications that we are working on as an organization ourselves. So there's a handful of those. Many of those are micro applications that we're expecting others to make use of or incorporate within their own apps. But there's also a lot of other individuals already starting to work on applications as well. Things surrounding governance, especially the governance of small groups, chat-like applications. We're working on our own sort of alternative to Slack, which we think is going to be much more interesting and much more powerful than Slack. There's also one that I'm interested in, but it's just sort of something that points in a direction, though I don't know how much use it will have in terms of driving hosting. And that's something that a guy named Victor Zonders in Sweden came up with at one of our recent hackathons called Mailbooks. And Mailbooks is basically a peer-to-peer library. The people in his community there's only 900 people in his village. That's not a large enough population to support a traditional library. And so he came up with an app that enables people to make visible what the books are that they have available for others to borrow. And that enables them to do sort of peer-to-peer library stuff. So I think there's a huge swath of things that are going to be available. I can't predict right now what the first ones are going to be, though, because we're going to be working with Mozilla to try to create a new browser, and we're looking forward to working with some of the largest consulting firms on the planet to try to make it easier for enterprises to step in and begin building applications on Holochain. There will likely be a significant number of apps entering into use over the next 6 months or so. Next up, we've got Lawler from Zoom saying, so is there a limit to how much fuel a person would be able to issue if they built up a good to very good reputation? Will, should I take that?
Yeah, what I would say is that the limit of how much fuel they can issue is their reputation. So I don't think you could get a reputation high enough that you would have unlimited fuel issuing allowance. But the better your reputation, the more trusted you are to repay that fuel that you're issuing later with hosting, and therefore the more fuel you could issue. Again, issue because it's mutual credit. You're not actually creating any fuel, but yes.
And our next one from YouTube. When hosting from a PC, what hardware specs matter the most? CPU, RAM, GPU, solid state drive, hard drive, speed, etc. Will, what do you think?
The theory is at this point that the most important one, the one that will bottleneck fastest in terms of all the different stats, is RAM. Because of like thread switching and stuff like that. Of course, we can't really know for absolute certain at this point, but most likely RAM.
And it will probably end up depending on the specific configuration and what the applications are that you're looking to host. But that's probably our guess for the default sort of autopilot specs. What else? We got, how would browsing look like? What would it look like? Are you working on a fast and suitable browser for it? So right now, and this has been my dream for a little while, so I was excited when during a conversation last week with Jim Cook, the chief financial officer of Mozilla, he was willing to make visible that we're going to try to work with Mozilla to create a new browser. And if you want to really get a deeper understanding of this, go on to Holo's Medium page, our blog, and look up the article that Nicholas Luck wrote just a couple weeks ago on reinventing applications. Without diving into too much detail there, because in Holochain, you can speak to and speak across multiple applications. Individual users can create applications that have a single user interface. So to them, it looks like just a single app, even though it's speaking with 5 or 10 or 50 different applications on the back end. And so this kind of custom remix of multiple other apps is what we see as the future. We see applications as just sort of micro grammars, almost like little languages for how people speak to one another. This is kind of similar to how the natural world works in terms of communication. So right now, many of you can see me thanks to the grammar of light, and you can also hear me thanks to the grammar of sound. And for those of you who speak English, you can understand me thanks to the grammar of English, which rides on top of that grammar of sound, right? And so this is how we think of communication more generally, and it's what we're trying to enable in the digital world as well. It's how language works. It's how culture works. It's not yet how digital communication works, and we're trying to change that. Pospy says, my job is to spread the internet for the last mile. I've been living for more than 20 years. I see the future in this project, but unfortunately the language barrier has hitherto been an obstacle. I hope it is a past and that this project can do it. Thank you for it. The question of fake identification. Oh, somebody deleted that. Can you undo that delete real quick? I was reading still. The question of fake identification of a physical and legal person would like to have a better explanation. Okay, interesting. So we have kind of two questions there. One having to do with language and the other having to do with identity. So I'll touch on language first. It is still the case that English is kind of the language of the internet and of web development in general. I too am looking forward to a time when that's not the case. I do, however, believe that initially Holochain, because English is the first language that we're writing it in, we're trying to do a good job of extending this and internationalizing, but it's coming from English first. I think that countries where English is widely understood are going to adopt first. My belief is that Holochain is actually going to pick up in Eastern Europe fastest. That's my own personal belief. I think that places like Romania have really high quality internet. That helps. They have a lot of developers. That helps. They have high quality education. That helps. There's a lot of people who speak English. It's very common, especially amongst the younger generation. That helps. However, they have poor infrastructure and government corruption and a lot of other problems as well. And those things help too. Those weaknesses end up making it more likely for Holochain solutions to get adopted there than they do for Holochain solutions to get picked up and made use of in a place like Stockholm or San Francisco or Zurich. It's not that they won't get used there, but you throw even a buggy, half-working solution into a situation where there is no working solution, and that starts getting adopted and used. And because it starts getting used, it matures quickly. So my expectation is places like Eastern Europe take off first. I think India is probably quickly on their tail, although India, because it's just so big, it's probably not going to have the same, oh, it took off in a tiny corner and all of a sudden it's everywhere, kind of characteristics that I'm expecting to see in Eastern Europe. And then other places like Africa, I expect to follow on soon after. Identity. We think about identity in a completely different way than most folks do. The question of identity had to do with legal identity, and legal identity has historically been associated with a body. This gets really deep into the weeds, so I'll try not to spend too much time on this, even though it's something that I loved working out on. There's actually a huge debate happening right now within a community that focuses on something called self-sovereign identity. This is a group of folks that I've worked alongside for a number of years in trying to design new specifications for digital identity that are sort of distributed forms of digital identity. And they are huge on the existence of a body. Like whether it's okay to just say, yes, there's a body that exists. Holochain actually falls pretty clearly on one side of this. We go, nope, you're looking at it all wrong. You're creating some absolute term. Kinds of systems that we're creating that enable identity to be bottom up, or essentially defined from the perspective of the observer, party who's looking to interact with you. What your identity is based on what they know about you. It's not what is your identity in some abstract sense. It's what's your identity for them. What do I know about you? What are the associations that I have with you? Do I know your name? Do I know your history? Do I know your reputation? If I don't, then you might have some identity elsewhere, but it doesn't affect my behavior. It doesn't change how I work. Yeah. So that's our take on all of this. It's a very different take, but we think it actually enables much more fluid and functional forms of identity. The one half of the battle that's happening there in the identity space has to do with this, does identity exist versus this other worldview articulated by a gentleman named Joe Andrew called functional identity. And we're landing very much on this functional side of the debate. Gary Alexander, can we hear from you next? Can we get Gary unmuted? Yes.
Okay, I'm on mute. Yes, I did put it in the chat. I didn't realize that was where the questions were coming from. Anyway, it's just a practical timeline. What do you see about the hardware and when the network will be up? And do you have some sense of when your first applications might be ready and usable? That's it.
Great. So we've got applications ready now. How usable? It's questionable. You can use some of them. They're not sort of consumer grade yet. Part of what we're trying to do with the funds that are coming from this fundraising from the ICO is get holo.host mature and launched. And also, in order to do that, we need Holochain mature and launched. Now, Holochain was launched as an alpha 6-7 months ago in October, and we've been building applications on top of that ever since. Right now, we're working on the beta release, and we're actually working on that in 2 forms. Currently, we've got a Golang implementation. We're also working on a Rust implementation that we think that will have some advantages for mobile devices. Our timeline looks something like this. Right now, we're anticipating being able to get holo.host, the alpha version, into people's hands in the 3rd quarter of this year. So that means July, August, or September. So hopefully by September, you've got a working version of Holo, and Holo ports are shipping with Holo on it that by then. And what that also means is we've got what we consider to be a stable release version of Holochain. We've done security audits on, so that not only can we run Holo on top of that, but other people can run security sensitive applications on that as well. Will, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, and your initial applications, is there any sort of overall killer app that everyone will want to use to
be totally honest, we think that's Holo. We think that Holo is the initial killer app. That Holo does basically peer-to-peer web hosting or app hosting. And when you look at that, you go, okay, well, is that really a big deal? And we think, yeah, it's a big deal. Amazon is the 3rd largest company on the planet today. They have a division that does web hosting. That division is called Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services makes up 10% of Amazon's revenue, but accounts for more of their profit than the entire rest of the company combined. So web hosting is the cash cow for the 3rd largest company on the planet. And you can think of Holo as trying to do to the cash cow for Amazon what Uber did to taxis, right? So yeah, we prefer the mother application rather than the killer app, but yeah, that's what Holo is. It's the flagship. Next up, we have, you benchmark in relation to Ethereum, but from what I gather, you seem to compete with AWS and other cloud hosting solutions. Yes, that's like we just said. Can Holo technically reach AWS levels of performance? I can answer that, but I just gave my little poetic answer. Will, do you want to take that one on?
Let me just read it over once again.
The question was, are we going to reach AWS level performance?
So Holochain is a protocol, not anything that's, it's a system, it's a pattern of use of distributed computing. So Holochain as a protocol is theoretically infinitely scalable. There's no limiting factor really on it. Holo itself is built on Holochain and maintains a lot of that scalability. So I can't see technical limitations that would stop us from reaching that, as long as it's, it's more a matter of demand, of are that many people interested in distributed computing rather than regular centralized computing, which is what AWS offers right now. And yeah, a matter of other factors. I don't know.
I'll just add a couple of things there. The one is AWS doesn't have like some magical computers. They're using commodity hardware. All of the big cloud hosting companies are using commodity hardware. They don't have like special materials or anything like that. They're actually doing distributed computing just behind a wall, right? The query hits their machines and then they distribute it, but within the walls of some big data warehouse. They're having to pay the cost of that compute entirely. Right? They've built a business where they are buying machines to do compute. Many of the people who are going to be hosting eventually on Holo Host are not going to be buying machines just to do compute. The folks who are participating in the Holo port thing, yes, right? And they're going to probably be making use of the early higher prices that are likely to be obtainable during the beginning of this network's life cycle. But later on, a lot of the computing capacity is going to be the idle capacity, the spare capacity on our laptops and desktops. So when I type an email, my machine is available to do a whole lot of other work. And that's the capacity that's being dedicated. Now, I didn't buy my computer anticipating that I would be able to pay for that computer through hosting, right? So I've got this extra asset sitting there. Well, lots of folks with that extra asset means that price can come down to Amazon's levels. It could even go lower. We'll have to see how that pans out, but we may actually be able to provide superior capacity to what Amazon's able to do. We have a benefit also of if you actually do the cloud hosting in a crowd way, you end up having machines spread all across the planet, right? So you can have somebody who's close to the end user that's asking for a web page. They can be serving that quickly from nearby. All right, I'm going to try to keep these answers a little shorter because we only have about 10 or 15 minutes left, and we got a bunch of stuff to cover still. Are hosts free to try to ask for any price they can get on the open market? Asks Winslow. Yes. That doesn't mean everybody else needs to accept your price, right? They're going to be setting their own preferences in terms of how much they're willing to pay. But you can ask. So if you think your computing is super special, try to charge away. I've hosted on Airbnb before. When my price gets too high, I don't book very many rooms. I think that's going to be the same situation with the hosting here on Holo. We've got another question. Holoport, how will it be controlled, i.e. selection of applications one wishes to host? Is it through your website? As Will had mentioned earlier, there's a couple of different options that we're expecting to make available. One is a autopilot sort of option where you just click the thing and it deals with all of it for you. It's managing the configuration for you. But we're also expecting to enable people to do very hands-on, detailed configuration of what sorts of applications or what the parameters are that they're going to make use of for deciding who the hosts are that they want what the applications are that they want to serve, and on the other side, what kinds of attributes they want from the hosts that they're looking to have host. What else? What about Holo itself? How does it decide what price to ask for new fuel it issues? I think we're going to be making use of those same criteria. We're going to be issuing into a market. So I believe that's going to be the case. I don't know off the top of my head. Wanting to how much more efficient we are relative to Ethereum and wanting to make sure that there is the gap needed to have a two-sided marketplace emerge between our price and what we think people are actually going to be able to offer hosting at. Another question. Can you explain a bit on your business plan after the ICO is finished? Yeah, we have a roadmap available in our green paper. You can go check that out. I think it's also available on our website at holo.host. The roadmap is basically we're trying to get this thing out the door. We're looking to have Holo ship in the third quarter of this year. It will initially ship in an alpha state. It will initially we'll have Holo hosts. We'll be receiving boxes in the mail, right, with computers that have Holo on them. And initially, that's going to be the distribution. Shortly after that, we anticipate having a downloadable version of the software available on Linux, since Linux is the OS that we're going to be initially supporting on the Holo ports themselves. And then shortly after that, we will be rolling out support for Macintosh and Macintosh, Mac OS, and Windows operating systems. What are three major blockers beyond technological bottlenecks that you foresee? Organizational, competition, political, consumer adoption. Three major blockers. I don't know, Will, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, the biggest one that came to mind is communication. What we're doing is really big picture, and even it's a smaller part of something that's even more big picture. It turns out to be pretty difficult to get across to people exactly the scale of what we're doing, and it's so different from the other things that are being done in the same space that we kind of are forced to be compared to. So that's the biggest challenge that I see and that I actually experience pretty much every day is communicating to people about what we're up to. Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, in order to make it so that people can wrap their heads around it, you go, it's this. And then that triggers all kinds of skepticism because people go, that's not possible. We go, well, it wasn't possible before, but it kind of is now. Forbes described us as, delivering on internet fiction, basically making internet fiction a reality. That's what we were trying to do. And they were referring to Silicon Valley, this HBO show that had as part of their plot last season, this kind of peer-to-peer web hosting concept. And lots of folks have wanted to do what we're trying to do, but we think that two things give us an advantage. One, Holochain. Without going into all the details on Holochain, the big thing that Holochain does for peer-to-peer web hosting in particular is it makes it so that my laptop doesn't have to store the content of your application in order to be able to serve that application. Because I'm running the peer-to-peer app on the back end, I can reach out in real time and pull the relevant content that I need to serve, just like that, package that up as a web page and send it to the end user, right? So that capacity is a game changer. The other thing is Holo Fuel. The design of our mutual credit cryptocurrency enables us to do millions or maybe even billions of simultaneous transactions because they are occurring in parallel, not having to occur in sequence. And that enables us to do the accounting on transactions that are really low value. So 1 penny or maybe even less of value transfer. We've got a really efficient crypto accounting system that enables us to do that kind of accounting. And that's never been the case before. No other system, not even the Visa network, is able to handle millions of simultaneous transactions, and they're not able to handle microtransactions like that. It doesn't make sense to send somebody 1 penny if it costs you 20 cents to do the accounting. You're never going to do that. I'm never going to pay you to do 1 penny of work if it costs me 20 cents to do the payment. So those two things, Holochain and Holo Fuel, end up being game changers that we think are going to allow us to deliver on the fantasies that everybody has been yearning for decades now. Can I use Exodus for the ICO? Will, do you know how to answer that question? Because I don't. In general, if you can, stay away from exchange accounts. It's just safer to do it otherwise. I think, I don't know, do your own research, look this up. But I seem to remember that Exodus you can technically do ERC20 tokens with it, but it's just a little bit of a pain to get them out later. It's not like Coinbase where they'll be actually lost forever. But I don't know, I'd recommend using MetaMask, just sending your ETH from Exodus to MetaMask and then sending from MetaMask to us.
Yeah, that's our general recommendation. Mbit has a raised hand.
Hi, Matthew. How are you? Actually, I have two questions about adoption. And after you release your mainnet, will you be compatible with the exchanges to list your token? Now it will be ERC20. It's easy to list, but is it will be easy to list it in exchanges when you release your Holo, when you release your mainnet? And the other question is about the Holo port. It can receive auto update for the firmware if there is any upgrade or something in the future. That's my question. Thank you.
Will, can you answer the update question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, one of the main things, I believe we just hired some devs specifically for this. One of the main things that we need to work on for getting the Holo ports ready to ship is the auto over the air updates. So yeah, that is something we're working on. It will be able to happen. It looks like Matthew is gone. Is he coming back? I heard you asking a question about exchanges for Holo Fuel. Because Holo Fuel isn't a standard cryptocurrency of any kind, it's brand new as far as we can tell. Just addressing the tech, it's not likely that it will be immediately able to be put on exchanges, but it is likely that it'll be eventually possible with some work. Yeah, I've had some conversations with folks not at an exchange, but Galia Benartzi from how am I blanking on their name? It was one of the largest ICOs last summer. Will, do you remember the name of the oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm forgetting this name. Anyway, you can look up Galia. She's the COO of a big mutual credit, not exactly token exchange, but I can't remember why. Let me go. This is driving me nuts. Sorry, y'all. Galia. Let's see. Bancor. There we go. So I chatted with Galia about what are the possibilities, and they were interested in exploring kind of being able to build bridges between the kind of mutual credit currencies that we're creating and the token stuff that everyone else is running. But again, that's off in the future, so I can't exactly make a prediction about whether that would happen through them, through somebody else, etc. That said, people will be able to redeem current fuel that's earned through hosting through Holo, the organization, regardless of whether outside parties are providing support as well. Are the Holo ports, will they keep going until all ports are sold out? I don't know. To be totally honest. Will, you want to say that? So we're going to be selling Holo ports continuously, at least for a little while, and that won't always be on Indiegogo. So we don't really have like a manufacturing limit, which is mostly why Indiegogo has the limited selling numbers. So probably in a few weeks or months, we'll stop selling on Indiegogo and we'll move to a different platform. But you'll still be able to buy Holo ports.
Wonderful. And Hannah, it sounded like, I'm going to unmute you. It sounded like you had a follow-up question maybe, or do you have any further?
I'm on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm currently in China, and as you said, you think Holo is going to take off first in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. So if the application developers are in Europe, and that means they will probably prefer to choose the hosts in Europe, right?
That depends on where the users are, right? Are operating like all over the world, right? And so serving an app to a user, I'm guessing that would actually be much more important than where the developer was located.
So does it mean that in the future, the application developers, they can also choose which port they want to use?
Which port?
Which Holo ports they want to use?
I'll let Will take that.
So the application provider can put their application up to be able to be hosted through Holo, and then at that point, any host on Holo can choose to host that app.
And there'll be a bit of a matching there in terms of offers and pricing and all that kind of stuff happening.
So is it like it would be better to purchase a Holoport Plus so we can have a better chance to be chosen by the providers?
I mean, additional capacity does help. The one advantage that the Holoport Plus gives you is the solid state drive. Not only does it have a larger hard drive and a faster processor, but it has a solid state drive, which we believe will, as Will had mentioned earlier, we believe that that's the RAM is going to be the primary factor in affecting performance. The other thing that you might want to do is invest in improved bandwidth. So if you're able to take some earnings and use that to pay for better internet access, that could help as well. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to run in just a few minutes, but I'll let Will take his. I have to actually go speak at another event here in Annecy, France. But I want to make one quick announcement before I do. We are actually giving away a Holoport on Telegram. We're doing a contest giveaway. You have to guess a number between 1 and 2,000. That is on Telegram. You can find the details in the pinned message for the Telegram channel. Again, that channel being t.me/channel Holo. CHANNELHOLO. Will, did you have anything else to say right there?
Yeah, I think that the strength of your Holoport and the hardware that you run isn't going to be too much of a factor in whether you get chosen for hosting. It will be a factor in how much hosting you can end up doing. But I think most of the hosting like distribution that's going to happen is kind of a round robin system, mostly fair. So, because we want it to be distributed, so it's going to try to be distributed as much as it can be among all the different hosts. So the strength of your Holoport is more about how much hosting you can actually handle and less about how much you get picked to be a host.
Because if we didn't do it that way, then it becomes very easy for existing established players to step in and just swoop up all the capacity. And that's the opposite of what we want.
Part of the value is that many, many different people from all over are able to host one single app.
Yeah. And from our perspective, this is actually really important. It's not just like, oh, it's nice and that helps for these folks. It's actually really important for the internet itself. The internet was designed in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis with one goal in mind. How can we come up with a communication system that can withstand a nuclear attack? How can we come up with a communication system that's resilient against failure? Now, nuclear attack is a specific type of failure, but there's all sorts of failures, and we're experiencing them a lot on the internet today, in part because the internet has gotten more and more centralized. It's gotten more and more centralized at various layers. We had an attack 2 days ago, right, on my Ether wallet that involved BGP and DNS, and they attacked Amazon and Google, right? So they attacked these two central points of failure in the existing internet, and were able to route traffic to some other device that could then see keys. That's not cool. Amazon Web Services, being the cloud computing giant, we feel like that's another layer of centralization that is causing massive failures. In fact, a year ago, February of 2017, there was an Amazon employee who entered the wrong command, hit enter, and a big chunk of the internet broke, right? So from our perspective, that centralization equals an undermining of the actual primary goal of the internet in the first place. So by distributing power, we're actually bring back the thing that the internet's supposed to provide, which is resilience, anti-fragility. So that's our, beyond, hey, you could make some money, beyond that, that's kind of the bigger picture here, is we think this actually delivers a healthier internet for everybody. All right, with that all, I have to run because I have to go to an event. Thank you so much. I'll leave it to Will and the rest of the crew. Take care.
Thanks, Matthew.
Bye.
So yeah, we'll do a couple more questions and then finish up, right? Because we're about towards the ending time. Does that sound good, Robert?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. However much more you want to deal with.
Cool. Okay. So let's see. Through YouTube, David F. says, just curious, are you saying the Holo token will be diluted by the creation of more Holo fuel when the D app is live? Not really, but I could see how you'd think that. Holo tokens are what we're selling during the ICO, and they're kind of like they're like a pre-sale of Holo fuel, a pre-launch sale of Holo fuel. They're like they're kind of like tokens, exactly. They don't do anything by themselves, but later you'll be able to trade them in for Holo fuel. So once Holo launches, there'll be about at minimum a 6-month window there where you can trade in your Holo tokens for fuel. And then fuel has its own totally different dynamics. It's a mutual credit system, as we've talked about, and it's not really anything like a normal token in the way that the supply and all that kind of stuff works. Coder++ says, can Holochain in future support computation-intensive applications, for example, big data analytics using MapReduce? Support computation-intensive. I don't know. I'm not the best person to answer this question. If you go to our Mattermost chat server, chat.holochain.net, and you post this question there in one of the relevant channels, there'll be maybe even like a Holochain core dev that can come along and give you a really good answer. Let's see.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi, sorry.
no
I have to ask a question from my friend.
Okay.
Because he bought 20 holoports in one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in my community, a lot of people are interested in participating because obviously we can join the ICO in China. So
Yes.
what is the suggestion for like one house to buy? Because my friend, he's really enthusiastic, so he bought 20. And I think maybe his internet can't support 20 ports. So like, you know, so how many should I buy really maximum? You know, is there like a number for that?
Yeah, good question. And thanks to your friend for that support and that interest. That's really cool. It's hard to say at this point how much like of the bandwidth of your house that will take up. Yeah, maybe 20 on one internet connection would produce like diminishing returns at that point. You wouldn't because they would kind of battle each other for the bandwidth, but it's hard to say at this point how much that'll affect the bandwidth and like what the limits of that will be. Okay, this next question says, will your website be refurbished after the ICO? 2 different website seems confusing for folks. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. We have kind of a couple websites that people use. We have Holochain, the Holochain website, holochain.org, and the Holo website, holo.host. And those are meant to be different, and they're meant to look different because Holochain and Holo are different things. Holo is a Holochain app, but there's also lots of other Holochain apps. And Holochain is this underlying protocol that Holo and many other apps can run on. So those are meant to look different. If you're talking about maybe the ICO site or the Verify site, they do look different just because that's how they've been designed. We kind of needed to put them up and have them working, and we didn't have all the time in the world to make them kind of match exactly thematically. But yeah, I don't know exactly what websites you're talking about, but that's what I can answer. We have a question about hardware getting updated. So it says, nowadays hardware gets updated quickly. Would it be possible half a year later that we need to buy new holoports again? I really don't think so. It's not like current crypto mining where you're doing all this work and kind of very little of it is actually getting put to any use, and you're just kind of cracking like a cryptographic puzzle that's not very useful for anything. Where I think that it's so demanding, that kind of crypto mining, that you do end up needing new hardware really fast. What we're looking at with Holo hosting is actually providing a service to people, and the bar for entry is really low, actually. The Holoport Nanos that we're selling on our Indiegogo page are, their computing power is equivalent to that of like a Raspberry Pi, which is this like, $40 computer about this big that you can buy. So it's very, the bar for computing capacity that you need is pretty low to actually be able to make a contribution to the hosting network. So I think that kind of solves that issue of hardware upgrading quickly, because you don't need the very newest stuff. You don't really need to upgrade as quickly as you might with current crypto things. Yeah, Hannah says, I would say you could spread them around the community and have different locations working together and managed by the community. That sounds really cool and super doable, yeah. Like a co-op for holoports. I think we've had some people actually buy holoports for that exact purpose, maybe. Let's see, we have a question from YouTube. Gleb says, if there's a version of Twitter with a limit of 200 characters, app 1, and the version of Twitter for 300 characters, app 2, how can the users of one version be able to contact with the users of another? That's a good question. So the way Holochain works, the validation rules, so the very core of the app, which says things exactly like you can't have a message over 200 characters or you can't have a message over 300 characters, they have to be the same for everyone using the app. And the moment you change that, you're not even using the same app anymore. That's how it's built. But Holochain is also really focused on connecting different apps together and having an ecosystem of networks. So a network is many people that all agree on the same protocol and the same core app. But the ecosystem is a network of networks. So if I'm on the 200 character Twitter and the 300 character Twitter, I'm a node that's between those two networks, and I'm in both of them, and I can maybe connect those two networks. And I don't know the details of how they would be able to contact each other, but there are ways to connect between apps, and a big part of Holochain is about connecting between apps, just like you're saying. Again, if you join the Mattermost, chat.holochain.net, there will be people that will be able to answer your questions in more detail. Let's do our last question. What's the max supply of HoloFuel? Is it infinity? This is a good question because I hear it as coming from a place or a context of the ERC20 tokens that we see that are very common nowadays, that are, each token is like a virtual thing, and it's there and you can pass it between you. And HoloFuel works very differently. It's a mutual credit crypto accounting system, which means that there's no virtual thing that's your token and you're passing it from one person to the other, or you're destroying it, or creating it out of nothing. Instead, everybody starts out with a balance, and they have this balance, and it's cryptographically secure. So that's how the security works. And let's say I wanted to make a transaction to Matthew because he gave me his bike or something, and I wanted to pay him for the bike that I just got. We would make an agreement on how much, so maybe 200 HoloFuel, right? And my balance would go down by 200, and his would go up by 200. And there's no actual thing that's being transferred from me to him in that transaction, but our two balances moved correspondingly, and that's what the transaction actually is. So the total supply, you could say, is zero, because since every positive balance is accompanied by a negative balance, if you sum everybody's balances, it has to be zero by definition. That's how the network works. But also you could talk about the active supply, which can breathe for the way that the network, in our case with HoloFuel, the way that the network is acting in the market, and the hosting, the market of hosters is acting to make not a value static, but a value stable currency. Cool. I think that's about it. I don't see any more questions here on my list. So I guess I'll say, I don't know, Robert, do you have any other anything else to say, or should we sign off?
I think we're done unless anyone else in the room here maybe wants to raise their hand. Oh, I see. Okay, I see a visual hand raised. Just one second.
Yeah, so is this a good place to ask a question related to development, like applications and how they would work, or should I just take it elsewhere?
Yeah, since I'm not a developer, I would maybe be able to give you a vague answer, but I would probably refer you to the Mattermost. So yeah, I'd say join the Mattermost. There's probably a link in the chat at this point somewhere. And there's an app development channel where a bunch of chain core devs and a lot of other people who are just interested hang out, and they can really answer your question in a really
so Will, I just need a vague answer right now because is there have you seen in the community someone trying to develop a, like say a Droid app, which is then having Holo, Holo APIs within that, or some Holo Holochain being used? Is that possible?
So you're asking about like an Android mobile app?
Yeah, mobile app with a Holochain in it that's being used to do some pieces here and there, like identity or say something else.
I don't think any mobile apps have been developed at this point because, well, I don't know.
Is it possible?
Yeah, if it's not possible right now, it will be possible in the future as Holochain is developed. Even pretty soon, probably. We're really ramping up development, but yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, Robert's mentioning they'd be web apps, so you could access them through mobile. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. This was really fun to have everybody on and to answer questions. And yeah, I hope to see you around the different communities on Telegram or Mattermost or anywhere else you can find us. Thanks.